day by day by day by day by day by day by day. March 15th, 2020. The day that, like Alice, we slipped down the rabbit hole or through the looking glass. In many ways, we were asked to be like children, do what you're told, trust the authorities as they know what's best, stay home, do your research, and learn new things you never thought you'd have to know. And like Alice, we learned how to adapt to a world that had changed in ways we couldn't begin to imagine. I remember thinking back then that we'd be back together in a few weeks, and then in a couple of months. After Governor Polis released the statewide stay-at-home order on March 25th, I remember Matthew and I on the phone coming to the realization that we had to cancel the mission trip and arts camp. I, of course, started to cry, and Matthew was stoic but teary because I could hear it in his voice. We made the decision to wait until May 1st to make the announcement, just in case it all turned around. We talked about how we would break the news to our families when we couldn't have a meeting. By this time, Zoom, which I had never heard of before, had been loaded on my computer, and Matthew sent me detailed instructions on how to get in and out and how to set up a meeting. On Saturday, May 2nd, we scheduled a meeting for Arts Camp parents first, and then a meeting for mission trip families. It was hard, but it was just the beginning of cancellations and moving things online. Learning new platforms, which is ongoing. I learned something new about showing videos on the projectors for the 8:30 service just this week. But letting go of Arts Camp after schools closed and our kids were in school online, I just couldn't let it go. I would lay awake at night trying to figure out how we could do it safely, what it would take to allow our parents to be comfortable letting their children come. Even though I had already canceled it, I just couldn't reconcile the canceling of Arts Camp. I started imagining how we might make it work as a day camp, outside if I could just find the right location. I kept thinking of the kids and how connected they are and what astonishing community they build together and how much they needed that right now. I think back now and realize how incredibly naive I was and how grateful I am that no one shut my ideas down. Because it worked so well, it gave us confidence to do the next thing and the next thing, and it helped me understand that the obstacles we faced were so often opportunities to find a new way. At the church, it was a time of not just thinking outside the box, but throwing the box away. There was no context for what to do, but gut instinct, common sense, and imagination. Taking each event coming up on the calendar and saying, how can we do it differently and still have a dynamic experience? Some things we had to let go of, but not many. We were challenged to stretch in ways that would never have occurred without the quarantine experience. And to complicate the challenge, we were isolated in our own homes as staff and had to use Zoom and personal telephone calls to think each new thing through and implement it. Each one of us learned so much and did things we didn't know that we could do. And then Matthew received the call to a church in Tennessee, and we added a search committee to our feast of new things to do in a pandemic. After we made it through our first pandemic Easter, still thinking that next year we'll all be back to normal, we took a deep breath and looked at the rest of the year. May is so full of so many milestones. We had to postpone our final confirmation retreat for the confirmands of 2019-2020. We postponed giving out our Bibles to kindergartners and third graders. We initiated online Sunday school, which we continued throughout the summer. Ginger made regular deliveries to her preschoolers and kindergartners, greeting many of them from their porches. Whoever thought that our porches and patios would become such sacred spaces? And Arts Camp details crystallized, and parents signed up their elementary and middle school children, and I came up with a whole new plan for how to do Arts Camp with the help of my intrepid team, Julia Worth, Sam Bauman, Susan Wilkinson, and for that first Arts Camp, Liesl Bryant. The details for how to do a music camp were brutal. Creating a makeshift sound booth, getting the equipment to record, finding ways to video kids, and connecting the music, having the kids write and produce their own adaptation of scripture. These brilliantly talented people heard what I had planned. They shook their heads. They told me I was insane, and then figured out how to do it. Finding computer programs that would do everything we needed to do and learning them, and then not freaking out totally when inevitable glitches happened. We learned how to flex, problem solve in the moment, and make it work as we went. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and when we had the final product, it was truly miraculous. The gifts that each of these people brought to our first Arts Camp were beyond anything I could have hoped or prayed for. Truly, I had a vision, but these artists brought my vision to reality in ways that astonished me. And the kids. I've been told numerous times in the past from Retreat Center staff that we have the most amazingly well-behaved kids. And yes, we do. But I truly wasn't sure what to expect in this new space at the Skaggs farm and the isolation of the pandemic and the many safety measures we had put into place, not the least of which was wearing a mask the entire time they were there, inside and out. Without exception, the kids were happy to be there, excited to be with one another, and so adaptable to whatever we asked from them. And now when I say middle school, I know a lot of folks go, ugh, middle school. But we have, without question, the greatest bunch of middle schoolers. They were awesome, both at Arts Camp and Confirmation. And our elementary kiddos were equally amazing. There was no complaining about wearing masks or washing hands or keeping distance from each other. What there was a lot of laughing, playing, talking, and enjoying one another. This has been true of all the activities I've taken part in over the last year and a half. The youth gatherings, confirmation, meetups in families' yards, talking on porches. Even when things have been hard and kids have struggled, they have responded with smiles and grateful hearts. And there have been hard times for kids and families, and by no means do I want to minimize that. I've talked to tearful parents and tearful kids. I've talked to parents who were scared to death for their kids. And I've talked to kids who were struggling so hard for a variety of reasons. Our Sunday school powwow hows on Zoom were sometimes brutally honest, to a point where I'm sure some parents were a bit uncomfortable with their child's honesty. But we were there on our screens to support each other and to share both the laughter and the challenges. Now back to the timeline. And then there was Calvin. Calvin's arrival in October of 2020 was exactly what our youth and our youth leaders needed. Calvin quickly went to work connecting and setting up online activities and jumped into confirmation and hit the ground, not just running, but doing the Ironman. It quickly became apparent that despite the pandemic, Calvin was creating relationships and building communities, both small and large. And for me, he was a godsend. Over the last year, his dedication to our youth, discovering their interests and building programs around those interests to draw them into community continues to amaze me. And his willingness to help this old dog learn new tricks is a gift I'm immensely grateful for. I want to read the gospel passage from Matthew again, this time from our New Revised Standard Version. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And he called a child, whom he put among them, and said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of stumbling blocks. Occasions for stumbling are bound to come, but woe to the one by whom the stumbling block comes." Fast forward to today. We're back in person in the sanctuary and in Sunday school with full COVID safety measures for our unvaccinated kiddos. Our classes are small, and we are limiting adult participation for the safety of all. And it's CE Sunday, when we would bring all of our children from youngest to oldest into the sanctuary with their teachers coming up into the chancel. I would tell you how many teachers we still needed, and some of you would come forward and join us. And then we would bless our teachers and our children and our youth. A great day of celebration to see all our children and youth together. Today, that's not possible. Our children are not vaccinated and we can't fill the chancel with people. But I'd ask you to try to see them up here now and reflect on this passage from Matthew and the last year and a half. Jesus calls us to be like children, receive the childlike, and not to put obstacles in their way, or we're doomed. As a church, as a congregation, and as staff working on behalf of this congregation, I feel that we have leaned in hard on this gospel passage with thanks to the parents who trusted us, to the congregation who stretched so far during the last stewardship campaign that you hit the goal and then some, and to a staff that wasn't just not afraid, but even in many ways eager to explore new ways of being church. We not only welcomed the children, but we sought out new ways to meet them. Not only didn't we put obstacles in the way, but we worked hard to remove the obstacles that we found. I'm so very proud of you and of us. And I'm so very grateful for this church and for each one of you. This year and a half, this pandemic time, has been brutally hard and richly rewarding in almost equal measure. And as we look to the future, I hope we don't bring the boxes back. I hope they remain flattened and recycled. I hope together that we can take what we have learned and envision new ways to build community with our children and youth and families. To do that, we need the voices of our families in our visioning process. Understanding how busy and stressful life in pandemic time still is, we hope to meet you where you are. So look for an email from us early this next week to get this ball rolling. I know that we can build on what we've accomplished with your input and with the unfailing grace of God. Please pray with me. God of hope, God of childlike humbleness and love, bless our children, our families, our teachers, leaders, and volunteers working with our children and youth. Be with all of us in this tender time as we take brave steps back to in-person life. Walk with us, guide us, keep us safe, help us to be discerning, lift us as we falter, and bless us with a childlike appreciation of the sacredness of the gift of life you have given us. Amen.